Hi there, welcome to the second video, the second book review. Today we're talking about a non-fiction book, which is the first one for 2025, and is the first one for the non-fiction book club, which is Think by Simon Blackburn. So it's been a minute since I've been reading about philosophy, and I found this book quite dense, quite thick, because it's only 300 pages. It seems also quite small, but it's been a minute since I've been dealing with classic philosophical theories. So also because Blackburn decides to, of course, compare different theories with each other, whatever topic he discusses. He is quite dense to follow. You need to kind of pay a lot of attention, and I know it sounds basic, but I'm usually reading contemporary philosophy, so for me it was a bit challenging to find myself again reading about Descartes or Hume or Leibniz. I was a bit like, okay, I'm not ready for this. I thought I was ready or not. Jokes apart, it was an entertaining read. Blackburn was a professor of philosophy at the University of Cambridge. Now he's retired. And he published this book in 1999, if I'm not wrong. And he decides to kind of give an introduction about the different philosophical theories. So he talks about knowledge, the mind, freedom, God, the self, reasoning, the word. And the first question he kind of decides to address, and is kind of a very basic question for whoever deals with philosophy, is what's the point of philosophy? And Blackburn says that he gives different answers, but the main point is that philosophy is conceptual engineering. So he calls it conceptual engineering, which means creating a system of thought. And the better your system of thought, the better way you're gonna live, because it's like living in a nice house. Like, is your house functional? Is it pretty? Is it sustainable? And so on and so on. So the main point of philosophy is to, kind of create a system of thought that allows you to go through the world with knowledge and kind of self-awareness as well, we can say. And Blackburn starts by of course, discussing one of the strongest tropes of philosophy, which is knowledge. And he decides to do so starting with Descartes. Not because Descartes is the first important philosopher to talk about it, but because, as he says, is the one that kind of set the tone for the modern scientific point of view. And I'm not gonna go in depth through all the chapters because, as I said, it's a very dense book, but Blackburn starts by talking about knowledge for Descartes, saying, okay, how can I be sure of what I know if everything is an illusion? The topic of illusion is something that was already discussed before, centuries before, by the Indian Vedas. So Descartes' idea is, okay, if there is an evil demon that gives me an illusion, so it gives me an illusion of reality, how can I be sure of what I'm experiencing? So this kind of gives birth to the idea of the cogito, which is like, so Descartes' arguments goes a bit like this, like, I'm doubting, I cannot be sure about anything, because this evil demon is cheating on me, basically, is giving me all this illusion of reality. Nonetheless, I am doubting. The fact that I'm doubting gives me the safety to say that I exist as long as I'm doubting. So this is the cogito ergo sum. I exist as long as a doubting thing, as long as I am a doubting thing. So in the moment in which I'm thinking, I am a thing thinking about thinking, which means that I exist, therefore I exist. And this is a very strong topic in philosophy. It's something that's been challenged a lot by philosophers who came after, but still it was not easy for them to kind of not falling back in what Descartes believed. Blackburn starts with the idea of cogito, with this idea how can we be sure about knowledge, and Then he goes through the idea of freedom, the idea of self, and the idea of the mind. So after talking about knowledge, he talks about the mind in the sense that, okay, if I am divided between the mind and the body, how can I then talk about consciousness? So Descartes, for example, talk about the idea of the ghost in the machine. So it's kind of something that inhabits the body and connects the body with the mind. This has been challenging for some philosophers because what even Blackburn was saying, how can I then be sure that the person next to me is a person and is not a zombie or a mutant? Because, they move, they kind of seem to have a consciousness, but do they really have a consciousness? And this is also a thought experiment that's been taken by Alan Turing in the 50s. Because what Turing observed is that if I am in this room and there is a machine in the other room, how can I be sure that the thing in the other room is not a person if I have no knowledge of whoever is in the other room? This is called like the imitation game, because if I'm here and the machine is in the other room and we are communicating, how can I be sure the thing I'm communicating is not actually a person? And this is also a very hot topic nowadays when we talk about AI, of course. For example, ChatGPT. How do I know that a machine doesn't have consciousness? Because that is not actually even the problem. The problem is, how do I distinguish between a person that has a consciousness and a thing that doesn't have consciousness? So, yeah, that's been very, as I said, Descartes kind of set the tone for all the philosophical topics after him. So yeah, this is one of the things, like, how do we solve the problem of consciousness through this? Then Blackburn talks about freedom, and free will, which is like, if everything is determined, like, whenever you talk about freedom, you need to talk about determinism. Let's say that first, in the sense that if everything is determined through a cause and an effect, how can we then talk about freedom? How can we talk about free will then? Because if I am bound to be determined, whatever I do is already determined by the cause before my action. How can we then talk about free will? How can we talk about responsibility even? Because how can I be blamed or even praised for doing something if I was determined to do that thing? So this is another very strong topic in philosophy, like the idea of free will and determinism. Regarding this, Blackburn finds a solution by saying that yes, like, there is a cause and effect, but it's not infinite in time. Let's say that whatever we're aware is a small segment of time, so we are determined in some causes, but we still have some freedom of action, because what rules nature is flexibility. So we cannot be 100% sure what's gonna happen after, because even in nature we see that there is a degree of flexibility. So that's another thing. Another topic that for me was very interesting is the one of the self, in the sense that, alright, how do we talk about the self? Do we talk about the self just in terms of mind? Do we talk about the self in terms of perception or bodily experiences? Because I'm having perceptions, I'm having experiences, but still, how do we jump through individual experiences to a person? Is the self just a bundle of experiences? Is the self who owns the experiences? Or is the self determined by memories? Because that's also another thing, like, can we be sure of our memory? Because this is also something that's been discussed even in psychology, in cognitive science. Memory is not totally reliable, because we forget things, or we may have like memories that they are not actually objective. So how can we be sure of ourselves if memory is not reliable? And this is something that's been seen as well in cases of Alzheimer or dementia. How can we talk about a person has a self if that person doesn't have any memory of themselves? So let's say that my grandfather has dementia, actually cannot talk about his identity anymore. His identity is gone because his memories are gone. Nonetheless, he's still there, he's still a person, and I still know him as a person from my experience. So For example, in this case, John Locke was recommending to separate the idea of human being from the idea of person, but again is a very hot topic, because how can we unify the self? Personally, I think that the self is a mix of all these elements. So consciousness, bodily experiences, memory, and narrative. Narrative, again, is something that's been discussed a lot by a philosopher that unfortunately passed away last year, but came way after Descartes, and it was called Daniel Dennett. And Daniel Dennett said that the self is a center of narrative gravity, which means that as the gravity, we cannot really see gravity, we cannot locate gravity physically, in a sense, like giving it a space or a dimension, but still is something that exists, and it changes as well. So for Daniel Dennett, the self is a center of narrative gravity, so the self is made by narrative. So is by creating a story that we're creating a self. And it's an idea that I personally like, but I don't think the self is only that. That's why I say my personal theory is that we are a mix of all these things. So yeah, that's one of the problems. Then what else? Well, he decided, Blackburn talked about God. We always need to talk about the problem of God, of course, because if we exist, is something else existing, something bigger than us, something that gave us life, and so on and so on. And in this case, Blackburn takes two different theories. For example, Pascal's theory about what is called Pascal's wager. So the leap of faith. So we should kind of make a bet and say, okay, shall I live as God exists or not? Is it better if I live as if God existed? The answer is yes. Of course, all these philosophers, we cannot forget that they were conditioned by their social and cultural setting, as for all of us. So a lot of the philosophers, including Descartes, they wanted to prove their system of thought based on religion as well, based on God. So we cannot forget about that. Then, of course, now philosophy took a very different route, but still, this is very important to keep in mind. And then Blackburn also took the opposite theory, which is from Stuart Mill, saying that this would mean mental slavery, to just jump with a leap of faith, you know. So, yeah, but also what is interesting is that Blackburn's conclusion, even if he's an atheist, or as he calls himself, is an infidel, he's not interested so much in talking about the problem of God. What he says is that even Hume, even Hume, there was an empiricist, observed that we live every day as a leap of faith. Because yes, we have experiences, but we cannot be sure what's coming next. So common sense and common life take us through leaps of faith all the time. Then Blackburn talks about reasoning, which is kind of the foundation of philosophy, in the sense that according to logic, we need to have some premises and some conclusions, which means that they cannot contradict each other. So according to the premise, the conclusion needs to be true. If the conclusion is false, it means that all the argument is false. So this leaves no space, leaves no room to contradictions. However, Blackburn noticed that language is made of ambiguities. Modern language in general, is made of contradictions, or rather ambiguities. And so, yeah, we can try to think as much as we can in terms of like reasoning, in terms of logic, premise, conclusion, not contradict each other, but still modern language is made of a lot of ambiguities. Then he talks about the word, and then he draws some conclusions, say, look, I wanted to show you all these themes, all these theories. My personal theory is that, Blackburn says, is that life is unpredictable. So there is a high degree on unpredictability in life, and it seems that we need to kind of build a bridge between past and future, but we cannot be sure of that bridge. And I kind of agree with him. I think that philosophy has the task, and always had the task, to create a system of thought that helps us live, without forgetting that the system of thought can be changed in a way. All of this said, I would like to discuss some parts of the book. As I said, I was not gonna go super in depth with the chapter, but there are things I would like to talk about regarding the book. So one of them being the there is a chapter, like one of the final chapter, one of the last pages, Blackburn talks about the fact that philosophy has been said to kind of coerce a thought on people, or a system of thought on people. And he rejects this idea, because of course the idea of philosophy is to let you build your own ideas. However, I think that Descartes, because Descartes set the tone for modern scientific view, and then the philosophy after him, one of the problems of philosophy is that it tends to be so strongly focused on the mind and reasoning, they kind of lose tracks of the reality. This said, what I mean is that it seems to me that by thinking so much and wanting to create solid system of thoughts, sometimes we forget about the real experience and the body experience. That's why I was saying that for me the self is never just perception and never just a narrative, but is a mix. I think that that's also why a lot of people now, they are very much attracted to yoga and spiritual philosophies and Eastern philosophies, way of thinking, because it's kind of finding our way back to something that is not just in the mind. And I think the problem there, the risk, is that the more you're stuck in your mind, the less you're actually living. So that's one of the things I've been noticing after reading philosophy after a long time. I love philosophy. For me, it goes hand in hand with psychology and literature. They are like my Cerbero, like my Cerberus, how you call it? Like this three-headed dog. They are all equally important to me. I study philosophy, and for me it's like my first love, but I don't want to forget that then the risk is to be stuck too much in your own mind when you are creating a system of thought that is supposed to survive any criticism. And we are always conditioned, as I was saying, so we are influenced by other things as well, so our system of thought may not stand all the time. Another thing that I notice is that as for the arts, so literature, music, visual arts, whatever, philosophy is very much like paying kind of a debt to the people who came before us, in the sense that, if you are reading Descartes, we see that Descartes is engaging with a thought that was by Heraclitus in ancient Greece. And if we read Nietzsche, we see that Nietzsche is kind of paying his due to Descartes in a way. And even to Socrates that he hated, but it's always like looking back to the ones who came before and say, okay, you pass me something, what can I do with this? So this of course implies that we are never in a blank slate. We are always conditioned socially and culturally. So for example, when Descartes talk about the matter and the fact that the matter changes, it kind of refers to Heraclitus, as I was saying, that was talking about the fact that we can never bathe in the same river twice, because we change and the river change. So there is still something that stays within us, but at the same time we kind of changed. And Nietzsche, on the other hand, took the idea of the evil demon and he kind of twisted on his hat, because he said, okay, let's say that an evil demon is gonna come to me and say you're gonna live this life over and over again. I would probably be driven mad by this knowledge. And this is the part where Nietzsche talks about the death of God. I love Nietzsche, you will hear me talk about him a lot. And So the idea of the death of God is not properly metaphysical. Nietzsche was not interested so much in metaphysics. That's not the point. Also because by definition God is perfect, should be eternal, so it's not possible that he's gonna die, and so on and so on. Actually, Nietzsche's idea is against absolutism. That's why I would say that I really like Socrates, because the point is that God is a bundle of ideas that are taken as absolute. And as philosophers, as human beings, as intelligent human beings, we should challenge the system of thought, which doesn't mean only religious thought. It can be even like science. The idea that science is the ultimate answer to all our problems is a value that is absolute. And Nietzsche says, I don't think this is going to work. We should take these values and challenge them and see if they fit for us. So going back to what Blackburn was saying is that not just that we need to be flexible or that life is unpredictable, but also about conceptual engineering is that we need a system of thought that is shaped on us. It's shaped on our beliefs, our experiences. This doesn't mean to take them blindly. It doesn't mean like, I believe in this, that's it. The point is questioning that belief. Like, okay, how sure am I? Is this system strong enough that it can stand on its own? And that's a bit the point of what he was saying at the beginning about knowledge. Sorry, I'm going to check the note because I don't remember by heart. But he was saying knowledge implies authority. By reasoning, you find a system and then a system supporting a system. So that's the point as well of philosophy, going back to what he meant at the beginning. Another thing I would like to discuss is that really bothered me in the book is the relation of Blackburn with therapy. That really, really bothered me. Not just because I'm a strong defender of psychology, and as I said, it's one of my loves, but also because I realized that this strong rationalism of philosophy then tends to kind of hate psychology. And don't get me wrong, a few years ago I was a bit like that. I was like, you cannot really prove psychology, so automatically that's bullshit. And I had to change my mind in a few things. One of them being that science as well goes through trial and error, like philosophy, as we were saying, like psychology. Moreover, what really annoyed me is that Blackburn at one point talks about the inefficiency, in a way, of therapy, saying, let's say that I have a moral dilemma. So he takes the example of this Annie, who is torn between breaking up with a boyfriend or choosing the career. And he says, let's say that she goes to therapy, and the therapist is gonna give her a pill to forget about these problems, these concerns. In that case, the therapist would do harm because, first of all, Annie would be kind of, judged by other people, so on and so on. I don't really remember that part, but then what bothered me was that he said, like this, Annie would not have any awareness of the concerns that she was dealing with. And I think that this is a fallacy, to be honest, and I'm surprised Blackburn is so prepared and still he made a fallacy of this kind, because of course, as I said, the book was published in 1999, so maybe the approach to psychology was different, but the point of therapy and talking therapy is to let the person reach their own truth, their own beliefs. So this means that it's not passively saying you should do A or B. That's a huge misconception of psychology. Like, you are not going to someone to give you answers. You're going to someone that's going to give you actually more questions. It's the point of philosophy. It's a bit like what Socrates was doing. Like, hey, are you sure what you're believing? It's the same. Like, you're not going to a therapist to, have answers. You're going to a therapist to find your own answers. So that's a bit of the fallacy. Moreover, because on page 288 he said this, actually, on page 200, about Annie and the pill and whatever, in page 291, he actually said, our concerns are not always evident to ourselves, which is exactly the point. This means that as you go through a system of thought, as you go through reasoning and thinking to find your own system of thought, you go to therapy to help you, someone external to you, to find you the answers, to make you your own concerns evident. Which is like for me, it's a big fallacy. Sorry, Blackburn, but that didn't work for me. And yeah, another thing that I want to point out is that, as we said before, reasoning is based on the fact that there should not be contradictions. As Blackburn said, language itself is made of ambiguities. Pragmatics, semantics, all study this. Amazing. A syntax, whatever. The thing is that we are made of contradictions. And as cognitive science, psychology, science, so on and so on, discovered that we have multiple personality, he also discovered that we are made of contradictions because we are made of multiple personalities. And this is something that's not said by some new age wave, as he was saying in some part of the books. It's said by science. Like, we are made of different personalities, which all make part of the self. And also we are made of contradictions. So contradictions are a natural part of our experience. And as I was saying before, I think it's very dangerous from philosophy to try of being, how to say, completely clean of all contradictions and all, creating a system of thought that is so solid and so absolute that then, first of all, is not inserting reality, and second of all, is free of all contradictions, because as human beings we meet contradictions. This said, I would like to end the review by reading a paragraph by Blackburn in Think, which for me was very nice to kind of wrap up the ideas that we talk about. So he said, "I have not tried to coerce people into one set of doctrine of views. The harmony between our thoughts and the world, the bridge we build between past and future, the sense of what the physical world contains and how our minds fit into it, are all topics on which the finest thinkers have hard themselves, only to be frustrated. There always seem to be better words, if only we could find them, just over the horizon. I believe the process of understanding the problems is itself a good." Thank you for watching. See you next time.